It looks like since there's more people here today, let's go ahead and put in a C or a Q in the comments column if you need to make a question or make a comment. So roll call to start out with. Mark Hugwatt is not here yet. Kim Austin? Here.
Mark is here now.
Oh, take her away. Mark,
no,
I'll finish the call to order. Daniel Krim?
I'm here.
Jeff Goulden?
Here.
Estella Hollander?
I am here, thank you.
Susan Heffley, I am here. Matthew Mitchell?
Here.
He's here in a field. Martin Ince?
I'm here.
Jeffrey Bauman? He was here.
I'm here.
There he is. Adam Williams? Looks like Adam Williams did not make it. And then we have, looks like a dozen or so public here. So we can start. Mark, let me know when you want to take over. Okay.
Susan, I'm going to let you keep going. I have to leave the meeting early today. And so if you can just keep going the whole time. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So first, let's start with announcements from the board. Does anybody want to make an announcement from the board? No one? I would like to, in lieu, in the case since there was the horrible bike wreck of May 28th, I would like to make a statement, which the rest of the board is welcome to back, but I would like to issue sympathies for the victims, the witnesses, and the family members of all that were involved in the wreck, which in a way, of course, involves all of us, and wish a speedy recovery to the survivors and the witnesses. I know that it can be as emotionally damaging to be a witness as to be actually involved in an accident. And to remind us all that as a board, that time is a factor and that our work is important, and the sooner we can get all of our goals implemented, the better it is. I'm sorry we don't have any city council members attending the meeting this week. But I would beg that the city council extends their greatest support to both us and the bike community so that we can actually make quick progress on that. If the rest of the board wants to second that, you're welcome to. If not, that's fine. And on a smaller, less public thing, I would like to renew my both my concern and Elson's about the lack of painting getting done on the streets, whether it's the Sharrow markers, which are almost invisible these days. Some of them look like they've actually been deliberately painted over. And then for my own case, I would love to see some reflective stripes painted on the Highway 180 FUTs that's all black pavement. With that, is there anybody else on the board that would like to make a comment?
I definitely join your sentiments. It's Daniel Krim. I join your sentiments in extending just as much. I'm a little bit, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you. Anybody else on the board want to make a comment? No? Well, then we can move on. Now is the time for the public to make comments. Do we have anybody here that would like to make a comment from the public? Julie Lead, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Julie. I am chair of the Transportation Commission. And thank you for the opening remarks, Susan. And what I wanted to talk with you about this afternoon is we have this great opportunity to present to City Council, the Transportation Commission, the BAC, the PAC. That is scheduled for June 22nd. I've been working with Martin and Jeff and the other commissioners on an outline of talking points for the presentation to council. It is not on your agenda tonight, but I wanted to, if I could, just take a couple of minutes. I know you've got a 3-minute cap on public participation, but I would like to show you the outline of talking points for a presentation to council. Is that okay with you, Susan, if I share my screen and show that?
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, we have been allotted 45 minutes for this presentation, and the outline I've put together in parentheses here has the approximate time. So I'd like to take the first couple minutes to introduce the commission and the committee members. And then talk about our charter and general responsibilities as a commission, and then as the BAC and PAC. Really briefly talk about what we've been working on. And one of the biggest things that you really have been working on, BAC and PAC, is the Active Transportation Master Plan. So I want to take about 5 minutes to provide a brief status update. And then after that status update, I'd like to give an opportunity to Dr. Cruikshank and Mr. Howitt for PAC and BAC items, talk about committee highlights. And I think this will be particularly poignant given the situation that occurred last month, just a couple weeks ago, to really kind of talk about some of the issues, the comments, and the dialogue that you've been having as a committee, and to have those highlights. And that's something that I can work with Mark on moving forward, assuming that he is available and willing to participate in the June 22nd council meeting. And then I want to take a few minutes looking forward, talking about roadway typical sections. And this goes hand in hand with some of the comments about what are we doing for bike and pedestrian infrastructure. This is something that the Transportation Commission is focused on, particularly with local streets and perhaps minor collectors. And then a few things that are coming up, which is Metro Plan, the RTP Regional Plan, and Prop 419 expenditures. So Prop 419, of course, is the continuation of the transportation tax, and there is a portion of that transportation tax that's allocated for bike and pedestrian infrastructure funding. Then I want to take a few minutes for special recognition of Jack Welch and his many years serving on committees and in the community, and really being the face of active transportation in Flagstaff. And then I'm really eager to have a dialogue or to hear from our city council members what they see the Transportation Commission's role and how this aligns with our charter. And of course, you know, when I'm talking about Transportation Commission, please know I'm also talking about the PAC and the BAC. Because we are working together. You may not see my face very often, but I stay on top of your minutes and talk with Martin and Jeff frequently about things that you are working on. And so we are a team, we are a group moving forward. So that is my outline. And I know this is public comment, so we can't really talk too much about it, but I wanted to bring this forward, show you what we're thinking. And I, of course, do welcome comments as appropriate, you know, as far as open meeting law, you know, if that's something you need to coordinate through Martin to be able to provide your comments, that's great. But we've got a couple weeks here, and I know that Jeff and I are working to get this turned in for City Council. We have to get our presentation turned in for City Council, I think the beginning of next week. So I would encourage you perhaps to send an email to Martin and or Jeff with any comments you do have. And with that, I will close my remarks. So I appreciate your time, and I'll be here listening this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. That looks interesting. How long do you expect that presentation to go?
About 45 minutes is what we have been allotted. I guess it also depends on if council wants to have more of a dialogue, and then it's up to them if they want to extend that timeline. It turns out we're the only agenda item for June 22nd, which is really unusual.
And Jeff asked you to post that outline in the chat if you could.
I will attempt to do that.
All right. Jeff, go ahead and ask your question. Oh, sorry.
It's a virtual meeting.
I put my question actually in the comment section, but I was wondering if we're going to be back to in-person council meetings at that point, and public testimony and all of that stuff for that active transportation presentation.
So I think I shared with the group the kind of the city's reentry plan and different things that happen regarding reentry based on hitting certain thresholds or targets. I have not seen any information about us getting closer to stage 4, and stage 4 would be the point at which in-person council and commission meetings are held. So there's no timeline set for that as far as I know, whether that be in June or sometime later. And I'll ask Jeff to pitch in to see if he knows anything more than that.
Well, if it is a virtual council meeting, will there be opportunity for public comment? Because I would anticipate there would be a lot of public comment on that issue from the biking community and maybe others too.
Rick Barrett did mention that there will be no in-person meetings before the summer break for City Council. I don't know if he knows whether there will be opportunity for discussion. Rick, do you know that?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Vice Chair, I would, yes, council meetings are very well coordinated in terms of all people that want to make public comment are coordinating, and they're called on to make comment via telephone. Although it's a little hit and miss, you know, the audio quality is not top notch. Oftentimes we have to ask somebody to, you know, hang up and try calling in again. So that's a bit awkward, but absolutely, council meetings have been welcoming public comment. Thank you.
Jeffrey, go ahead with your comment.
I just add on that Julie, Martin, and I will all be in the meeting and the Teams meeting, and I think the chairs of the PAC and BAC will be in the Teams meeting, and I bet we can extend that to everyone on this committee on the PAC and BAC if they'd like to, and that way if you end up being part of public comment, your audio won't be an issue and you'll be tuned right in. So we can, I see head nods, so maybe we'll just extend that invitation to everyone, and you can choose to join like a citizen or join more like a staff or presenter. So we can do that to help you out. It's a better experience.
And go ahead and give what's the time of the council meeting on the 22nd? This is a Tuesday, the 22nd at 3 p.m.
Start at 3, and as Julie mentioned, it's the only item on the agenda, so that's pretty wonderful for scheduling.
So far.
So if they typically go to 11 p.m., we have, what is that, 8 hours?
Yikes. Excellent. Is there anyone else in the public that would like to come forth with a comment or question? I'm not hearing anyone. So we're up to the old business, or no, the approval. The approval of minutes. Those were not the most recent minutes, as far as I can tell. Martin, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. My apologies. I didn't get the May minutes done, and then I realized that I had not gotten the April minutes done either. So I'll consider myself admonished to get them both ready for the next meeting.
Delegate to the cats. Delegate. All right, well, go ahead and take it away for the active transportation master plan then.
So hopefully that's visible on your screens. It was my intent for this meeting to provide you with kind of an updated draft of the Bikeways plan. Bikeways plan is, you can think of it as kind of a sub-element or a detailed component of the active transportation master plan. It's something we've been working on and talking about for a number of months. I did not get to a point where I had an updated draft for you to read or go through, so we'll have to kind of make do with this discussion. So what I thought I would do tonight is kind of go through the what's in the plan, starting with an outline. This is kind of the essentially the table of contents. There are parts of this, as I mentioned, that we've talked about before, and so I will kind of go through those somewhat quickly. Since we've talked about them quite a bit in the past, we don't need to spend a lot of time going through them again. However, as we go through different slides, if there are any questions or you need clarification about something that we've already talked about, by all means, feel free to kind of pitch in and or jump up and ask the question or make the comment. When we get to the end, I think what I'd like to spend a little bit more time on, what we haven't talked about so far in great detail, is the implementation of some of these plans and how we kind of get them to a point where they're built on the ground. Part of that is how we prioritize it. Part of it is how we deliver it, and part of it is what it looks like after, in kind of the short term and the medium term. So I've got a little bit of information about that we can spend some time on. And get your feedback and comments. Again, as we go through this, please just feel free to jump in and ask questions or provide comments as you have them. And I think for just because we have a fairly decent sized group here tonight, maybe it might be best to put a Q or a C in the comment section, or raise your hand. And if I could ask the chair or vice chair or the members of the committee to kind of keep an eye on that for me, so we don't skip by somebody that wants to ask a question or comment. Sound okay? Any introductory thoughts or comments, or do you want to go ahead and jump right in? All right, jump right in is what I'm hearing. So here's excuse me, here's the outline of the document. I think we've worked on a lot of these things before. Since there's more information coming up, I won't go through this in any detail. The underlying principle of this Bikeways plan is that we implement a low-stress bikeways network. And if we break down those individual terms, bikeways are linear transportation corridors. Network is a continuous, comprehensive, and connected system of bikeways that goes all throughout Flagstaff. And low stress means that most people will feel safe and comfortable riding a bike, regardless of their age or ability or other circumstances. So that's really the principle that we're shooting for. We've seen this before. It's based on separation. So we try to cover every street in Flagstaff essentially and make it accommodating for bikes, and we do that on low speed and low volume streets for the most part. bicyclists will be comfortable sharing that with traffic, because there's very little traffic and it's going not very fast. So think of this as kind of your neighborhood residential streets. When speeds and volumes increase a little bit, then typically in the past we've responded to that by providing conventional bike lanes for dedicated space for cyclists. You'll see later as we go through this plan that we're expanding the concept of conventional bike lanes to include buffered bike lanes as well, to provide just a little bit of extra space between where bikers are and where traffic is. And then finally, as we get to our highest speed and volume roadways, just simply having standard bike lanes is probably not enough for most people to feel comfortable. So here we introduce the concept of protected or separated bike lanes, or completely off-street facilities like foot trails. So that's kind of the three levels. And again, this is intended to cover not just our arterials and our busier streets, but to make a robust network all through town out of all streets. We've talked before about the hierarchy and 4 levels. Primary and secondary are fairly similar, but they would be the main bike routes. Here's what it looks like, with the primary routes being in dark blue, secondary in violet or purple, and then third and fourth in lighter blue and orange. And what that means, it has a number of, practical consequences. One is that for implementation, we would prioritize the primary and secondary bikeways, those being the most important ways to get around town. Number 2, the primary and secondary ones are more likely to be protected or separated facilities. Number 3, we would use it as kind of a guideline for maintenance. So we would have higher expectations for maintenance in our primary and secondary routes. Again, those being more important in the overall network. Number 4, for closures and detours, we would expect that the primary and secondary routes would be more likely to be kept open, that we would do everything we can to keep them open, and when they have to be closed, we would provide feasible, viable detours for them. And then finally is wayfinding, and this is a function that it helps people get around town, and if they understand kind of how the hierarchy works, that the wayfinding function works better and it's easier for people to navigate, and using the system is more intuitive. For facilities, we divided it into 3 classes: shared, dedicated, and protected. Shared, and this kind of relates back to the slide I showed previously regarding the separation principle. Shared means you're using the street with vehicles, but they're low volume, low speed. Dedicated means that bicyclists have their own space on the roadway, so that includes, in some cases, shoulders, in a lot of cases, bike lanes, and then also what we were talking about before, buffered bike lanes. And then the final category is protected facilities, which includes protected or separated bike lanes, cycle tracks, and foot trails, where you're physically or horizontally separated from traffic as a cyclist. And then I think we've looked at the document before at some of the individual facilities, but here are the ones that fall under shared. And in the document itself, there is more detail about how the facilities work, some considerations for them, as well as some illustrations of what they look like to give people kind of an idea of what we're talking about. So here are the ones that are shared. Dedicated, I mentioned, are shoulders, bike lanes, and buffered bike lanes, and then the protected ones that I mentioned as well. That really covers corridors and segments, but where a lot of the action is for bicycling is at intersections and crossings. So we have 5 different classes here of different types of facilities. Enhanced crossings covers kind of a wide range, everything from cross bike markings, which are really like crosswalk markings, but for bikes, bike boxes, green bike lanes, 2-stage lefts, and it goes down the line. And again, there's more information about each of these in the document itself. Beacon crossings, I think we're becoming more familiar with. There are a few examples around town. The last 2, the Toucan and the Bike Hawk, are aviary-themed facilities that were really developed in Tucson, and they are specific to bikes. Actually, they accommodate both bikes and peds, but they're specifically designed to accommodate bikes in addition to peds, whereas the first two are really kind of pedestrian facilities that can be used by bikes. Protected facilities include protected intersections and protected roundabouts. And then the last one is really kind of a design feature that if you have protected bike lanes that lead into an intersection that's not protected, that kind of gives you a way to get through that intersection. Grade separated crossings we're familiar with. Bridges and tunnels are for the exclusive use of bikes and peds. Underpasses and overpasses are where we have bike lanes or foot trails or something that is in addition to a roadway that gets over the railroad tracks or the interstate or something like that. And then finally, sorry about that. The mouse is just a little bit twitchy. I'm at work today and I'm not used to like all the keyboard and the mouse and everything is just kind of is new to me, although I've been here before last year for many years. So signalized intersections, there are a couple things that we might do where we have existing traffic signals. Some communities use bicycle signal heads. Lead bicycle or lead pedestrian intervals can help in some circumstances. And then where we have a high percentage of right turn crashes, different forms of right turn on red restrictions. For facility selection, and this really gets at when is it okay for bikes to share the roadway? When do we need a dedicated space? And when does a dedicated space not adequate on high speed and high volume roadways and we need something that is protected or separated? And the features that we use are primarily the speed and volume of the roadway. So as we go up in speed and volume, the need for separation or dedication increases. The bikeway class, as I mentioned before, we're more likely to use protected or separated facilities on primary or secondary bikeways. And then finally, I think the last one is if it's an existing road versus a future road, it makes a difference. All of our existing roads are going to be essentially retrofit situations where we're going to be somewhat constrained in almost all cases by the existing width of the roadway. So there's a process of determining what the correct level of separation is, but there's also a process of determining what we can actually physically fit into that roadway. And so it's kind of a combination of those two things. So it won't really be cut and dried in any case. I think each one is kind of a one-off. We've already done a lot of this work looking at individual roadways. In fact, I think our last two meetings, we spent some considerable time looking at and talking about individual roadway segments and what might be appropriate for them. The document includes some very detailed guidance for different facilities. I included a few here.
We had a comment from Martin.
Okay, Mark, do you want me to read it, or do you want to ask it out loud?
Yeah, I can ask you out loud. My concern back on the traffic signals was when traffic's flowing westbound during sunset, it can be really difficult to see the green or red light because the sun is backlighting it. And I'm wondering, maybe this is to Jeff, what can be done? We've seen shades behind the traffic lights, sometimes rapidly flashing traffic lights, to mitigate the difficulty of seeing the traffic signals during sunset.
Martin, do you want to take this one, or do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, I think you should. I don't really have a good answer for this one.
Sure. So there's a number of things we do when we're designing a signal from each approach. You'll typically see an overhead indication for each lane. So there's a mast arm and there's an overhead indication over each lane is one of the things that we do. We used to use 8-inch signal heads and now we use 12-inch signal heads. Each head has both a hood that shields the sun from overhead, directly. It's a hood over the top, so it's blocking sun directly overhead. And then they also have louver plates on the back. They're back plates. They're louvered back plates, which also provide shielding of the displays from things like the sun or headlights. We also provide typically left side and right side indications. So you have overhead for each lane and then supplemental left side on the left side pole and supplemental on the right side for the right side pole. There's also a number of standards for the intensity of the light, how bright the light is. Trying to think if there's any more things I could cover quickly. Does that all make sense? The different things that we do, and there's a number of standards for the visibility angle for where all the heads need to be. There's a number of other factors, but that's kind of the basics of what we do. So redundancy, backplates, the intensity of the indication are the big things.
Thanks, Jeff.
Sure.
Okay, so the first two on the list are buffered and separated, and I bring those up because I think that where we've landed, in particular for future roadways, is that a separated configuration would be kind of our standard go-to for higher volume, higher speed roadways. And you can think of these are the ones that are going to get built in the future. So either the ones that are brand new that get built, in parts of the city that aren't developed, or what gets built for when roadways are widened. Like, for example, we've got projects that are looking at Lone Tree, and we've got projects that are looking at Butler and West Route 66. The other one is buffered bike lanes, and I think what we're looking at is that becomes kind of the default for moderate speed and moderate volume roadways in place of standard bike lanes. I'll jump down to the bottom one, Foots Trails. I think over the last couple of meetings, we've talked about how to use Foots Trails as part of our bikeways network, particularly in context of how we used to kind of plan for bikeways, which was that we would provide on-street conventional bike lanes, and then in some cases where they were planned or on busier streets, we would use a Foots Trail for people who didn't want to be on the street in the bike lane. Now we're going to more of a concept where we're providing what hopefully should be comfortable bike facilities. And so there's really not the need to have those Foots Trails along a roadway. And so how do we plan for that? Where do we keep them? Where do we leave them? If we're eliminating Foots Trails from where they're planned, are we kind of shortcutting the system or leaving gaps in it that we need to fill in some way? And then I don't think we've talked about this much, but I think there's a question about where we've started a roadway, and I'm thinking of like John Wesley Powell or Woody Mountain Road. We've kind of started to build Foots Trails, but in the future, as the roadway gets extended, we may want something different, like separated bike lanes. So how do you kind of transition from what we have now to what we want in the future, and do that in a way that is as smooth as possible? And then finally, the one in the middle is protected bike lanes. And here I would think, like, just think of a conventional bike lane along the side of a road, and then think of some form of railing or candlesticks or something that provides a barrier between the bike lane and lanes of traffic. Our hesitation, we've talked about this in the past in the context of maintenance and what happens with them. And our hesitation in using them is that it introduces a maintenance obligation for the city that at the moment we're unable to meet. In other words, it's going to be a fairly narrow facility. The equipment that we have is not going to work to clear those things of snow and cinders. So we have to kind of switch how we think about that, and possibly get new techniques and new equipment to manage that. Overall, that's also an increase in maintenance obligation in a way. Like we will have facilities that need to be maintained that we do not have now, and we expect to add these in a number of places and add some decent miles. So it's an additional obligation for the city in addition to being kind of a new thing that we haven't done before. So based on that, we had kind of thought of separated bike lanes as being the answer, because it's something that the city knows how to maintain. Although again, it's the same circumstance, and it will be a new additional maintenance for the city. It's things that we don't have that there's no maintenance because we don't have them now, and there'll be more maintenance in the future. All these things need to be addressed. I think that, over the next couple of weeks and months, there'll be discussion about this idea of protected bike lanes. The advantage of them is that they're much less expensive to implement, I would say, than building separated bike lanes. And so there would be an opportunity for us to do more sooner with less resources, but it's critical for us to answer those maintenance questions. Last we checked, it still snows periodically in Flagstaff. When it snows, we still use cinders. The snow and the cinders are gonna end up in that bike lane, and if it's separated from the regular roadway, it makes it a little bit more difficult to maintain. I'll pause there and see if there are any thoughts or comments on that. I know we've had a lot of discussion about that, but I think we're not quite through with that discussion. I think more of that will come up in the next couple of months.
Martin, I have a comment or a question on these 3 categories: buffered, separated, protected. There is going to be a big difference in different levels. And then we always talk about the perceived risk or comfort level that the most cyclists are going to get out of it. And it seems like getting the best bang for our buck, since we definitely are limited in our outlays, would be to get the separation that is most efficient, and then we may have to do like education to assure cyclists that I don't know, the potted plants are just as safe as a curb, or do the studies therein that would indicate which are the best separation strategies. I guess that's more of a comment. But do you have the data on which of those is most efficient at keeping the public safe?
No. Usually a lot of this stuff we kind of we talk about in terms of where people feel most comfortable. I mean, I think the idea is that anything that we build would meet basic standards for safety, that it would be designed in a way that it would encourage people to be safe. And of course, facilities themselves aren't necessarily safe or unsafe. People behave in ways that are safe or unsafe. So the idea with facilities is that we build things that encourage people or allow people to be safe and have, exhibit safe behavior. And it's the old maxim that good design encourages good behavior. So we want things to be safe, but I think what we're really talking about is what makes people comfortable and what is appealing as a bicycle facility. I'll share it again, but there was a study done a few years ago that is the only one that I've seen that talks about different types of protection, from park cars to candlesticks. And I think we looked at it at our last meeting, but I can share that again. From including conventional bike lanes and buffered bike lanes, and it's a few years old, and some of the concepts that they had back then are different from some of the concepts that we talk about today. But it seems like a good place to start.
Thank you. Kim has a question, followed by Estella.
Hey, Martin, remind me that company in Minnesota that puts those temporary or permanent structures. Is that, what type of facility is that again? I always forget. Is it a protected or separated? It's a protected?
Yeah, because I think it would, like those, you're talking about the metal railings that have kind of a low metal curb and then kind of a metal candlestick above that. Mm-hmm. So that would go between essentially where the bike lane stripe is, between the bike lane and the first lane of traffic.
And they get snow, right? So, well, I guess they probably, how do they deal with that? Let me go there. Do you know? Do you remember?
You're like Minneapolis?
Yeah. Do they just have better tools, maintenance tools for that we don't have? I'm just curious.
I'm not sure. We looked into this some months ago, and I just don't quite remember the answer.
Okay, I don't either.
We can look that up again. I mean, Minneapolis has had a fairly robust kind of plan for maintenance, and including snow removal, and I just don't remember what was in it.
Okay,
Calgary also had one, but their plan was more kind of geared toward like kind of setting public expectations, like letting the public know what to expect after it snows. Even to the point of like they would on their website, they have kind of this dashboard that said, okay, it's been 3 days since we had 34 inches of snow. Here's what to expect in the way of snow clearing. Because not all of it gets cleared right away, right? So they have kind of a schedule set. So here are the things that get done first. Here are the things that get done second. So if people know that things are coming, they're more likely to, we'll be happier, I guess. Okay, this foot trail isn't cleared today, but it will be by Thursday.
Right. So, and before Stella, really quick, I agree with Susan. Whatever the city puts in, education has to be a key to that, not only to the bicyclists, but to the drivers, because it goes both ways, and you can be the best, and follow every single rule, and the driver doesn't. So I think it goes both ways, and sometimes I feel like we could do a better job in the education in the city, but that's something that is a key that needs to happen. Okay, take it away, Stella.
Thanks, Kim. So just trying to kind of work through some thoughts and a bit of kind of on the implementation side with Martin, as you mentioned, some of the challenges like with snow removal. But I think a lot of these will take a bit of like a paradigm shift and actually kind of having, these trade-offs conversation. I think with all of these solutions presented, I feel like right-of-way will also be a constraint. And so I worry that, we'll end up almost kind of doing what we have been doing and not, kind of pushing that needle and making those trade-offs, like, for example, reducing lane width or, I don't know, other solutions to try and implement these or with snow removal. I mean, there's plenty of snowy cities who have figured out how to remove snow on protected bike lanes. So I think it's, making that investment and potentially, buying smaller, more maneuverable snow removal, things like that. And so I'm wondering, has this planning effort kind of helped push those conversations either on an internal staff level or on a council level? And then kind of going a step further, if the May 28th events has kind of sparked that conversation again to be able to push that needle and kind of implement some of these solutions.
Yeah, I would say it has. I'm not sure if that was a rhetorical question on your part, but I'll answer it. I think it has. I think that we need to make sure that the maintenance is a part of that conversation. That as we talk about, like you said, the trade-offs and the paradigm shift, that the maintenance is a big part of that. And I think the council in particular needs to hear that. And that we can, other communities do this, other cities have these facilities, but they have made a commitment to providing that maintenance and making sure that these things are taken care of. So I think that we have to have that as part and parcel of the conversation. That if we want these, that it comes with an obligation to take care of them as well. And of course, for us that I think for a big part of the community that trade-off is more than it's more than worthwhile. Right? Like this is something that we really need to do and we should be doing. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Matthew has a comment.
I just want to mention, since we're talking about buffered bike lanes, what the city did last year on Aspen in front of the downtown diner and Heritage Square, where we used those water-filled Jersey barriers, and we had 2 levels of protection for the people that were sitting at tables dining literally in the roadway. Plus, we had a dedicated lane for bicyclists to go through, in which there was no, as a bicyclist, when I took those lanes, I could see where the pedestrians were crossing, so I knew where I needed to slow down. But the rest of the time, it was like, it was a completely dedicated to a bicycle, and it was just exhilarating to ride. It created the safety, and those water-filled Jersey barriers, those are something you don't need a big special equipment to move. So if we have a storm coming, theoretically we could move those out of the way. We could scoot them to the side. We don't need to fill them completely full of water. We could leave them just as training devices for traffic calming devices to slow traffic down, even because it kind of choked down the one lane that was going through there. So people were driving through that. The active traffic was actually going slower than it typically would get in that corridor. So I thought that was like a grand slam. The city put themselves out there. They did that, and I just hope we see more examples like that in the future. Experiment a little. Put ourselves out there a little bit. That was just a grand slam success the city did. Hopefully, we see more of that.
I agree, Matt. That was great, and I was sorry they didn't continue that this summer. That would have been great. Mark left a message. He had to leave the meeting because he had another bike ride planned for Wednesdays, but he wanted to make sure that we let the public know that Thursday, the first Thursday of the month, is our normal meeting day. And his final comment is, I am concerned about the flashing yellow left turn signals. I was almost hit recently by a driver who apparently thought the yellow had meant that his protected green arrow had just ended. Okay. So carry on, Martin. Oh, and Lauren has a comment as well. Go ahead, Lauren.
Sorry, maybe I should put a C when I put links in the chat. But I think Colorado Springs did a really interesting write-up on their separated bike path plan. They also benchmarked a few different cities. So I don't know if that's part of something that you already look at, but the link is in the chat. And then I'm trying to find, I have read about one city that used hay bales to test out different scenarios for traffic calming, and it goes right along with the water container thing, like non-permanent, easy to adjust to see how traffic interacts and how it impacts the surrounding area. So it seems like a really neat strategy to try to test stuff out before spending a lot of money. Thanks.
Thank you, Lauren.
I'll just say that I spent a good part of my youth like throwing hay bales and stacking them and so on. They are not soft. Okay. Plow forward. Other questions, comments? Thanks for sharing that information also, Lauren. That's very helpful. So we were talking about implementation. The first
we have a late breaking comment from Daniel.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm still formulating thoughts here. I think part of the snow removal is exactly what Estella said. It's got to be a paradigm shift. It's got to be training. I think there's a training issue with snow removal on Flagstaff and bike lanes. And I think it's a budget issue. I think that taking a look at what their snow removal budget is and how much those small, almost bobcat looking snow removal specifically for smaller areas like bike lanes are. And I mean, at least start the conversation on purchasing one of those. And then a design issue with, we talked about that some of our bike projects are being designed around roads that haven't been built yet, and those roads can be built in a way that accommodates better snow removal policies.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, Daniel. I would also add that from a previous slide, if we kind of talk about primary and secondary bikeways and kind of the overall hierarchy, it breaks the issue into more manageable pieces. Like, we don't necessarily have to do this for every street or every bikeways, but we want to make sure that it gets done well on our most important, or the highest class of those bikeways. So can we is there a way we can start on primary and secondary? And then again, we'll see it. There's some maps and some statistics coming up a little bit later, but it's not a situation where in 10 years we're going to have 120 miles of protected bike lanes. We've kind of got them planned for the places where they're needed most and where they do the most good. So it's not a hugely extensive system. So I think we need to keep that in mind as well, that when we talk about maintenance and snow removal, that there's a couple things we can do to kind of manage this process, and it may not be as overwhelming as we tend to think of it.
Martin, I'd like to interject, and going back to the previous slide again, and perhaps with an eye to the greater number of public we have this month, and possibly that due to the bike wreck again. But I did want to remind the public that there's some really good resources for you to figure out where we're at in our planning. And that is to follow up the links for the master plan and FUTS ArcGIS maps, that you can find those links if you go to the agenda. And if you click on any particular part of the road, you will see that there is a listing of both what the state of that particular road is now and what is planned for it, and what the time frame is for that, whether getting buffered lanes, for instance, on Butler is planned for the next, the shortest term, or whether it's a long term. And of course, in the case of Butler, it is a short-term plan. So I just wanted to inject that. All right, go ahead. Sorry, Martin, go ahead.
Thank you. So on implementation, we have a number of ways that bikeways can be built as part of other projects. There are some opportunities for upcoming roadways, some capital projects, private development will do it, part of the FUTS master plan, and then anything on any NAU campus, of course. So in all those cases, it's kind of the role of the plan to make our expectations clear and to make sure that when new roadways are built or when improvements or enhancements are made, that it meets our expectations and kind of fills in those pieces of our overall bikeways network. That leaves the last category, which is there's no other opportunity to have somebody else build it for us. So we have to plan and budget and design and implement those on our own. And that's what we're going to do with the funding from the Proposition 419 sales tax. So here's a lot of words, but it describes our intent for the short term with the bikeways plan. And I'll go through this quickly. First, complete and connect the primary and secondary bikeways to the greatest extent possible, including using interim facilities where necessary, or to build a complete system. So we have something that's in place and in functional as soon as possible. The second one is to build a few high visibility and impactful bike enhancements that include higher level facilities like protected or separated bike lanes and protected intersections. And there may be some interest in moving even faster on getting some of those things in place sooner rather than later. The third one is to introduce other types of advanced facilities to better accommodate bicyclists. These are things that are used in other communities, but we don't have a lot of experience with them here. And we're not, the overall plan is not reliant on one or two types of facilities. It's going to be a whole bunch of different things, all kind of tied together as a system. Second page, we want to implement basic elements of the third and fourth level bikeways. That includes bike lanes and bike routes to really make the system more robust and cover every part of town. So no matter where you live or where you want to go to, hopefully there's a bikeway that can get you there in the short term. And then finally, and I think this is really the important piece, is that we need to pull the whole thing together through comprehensive signing and wayfinding. So it all kind of works together as a system. So no matter where you live, that you can get on a bikeway, and there's a way for you to get to whatever your destination is. And even though all the final facilities may not be in place, that enough of it kind of exists for you to make that journey. And I think when we get to that point, that it will be the what's the old cliche, that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Prioritization, we looked at a couple of different things. I mentioned the bikeway hierarchy. How complete is the facility? So it's just a missing gap in between two other things that are complete. It tends to be a higher priority. Some things are reliant on other projects, so it doesn't make any sense, or it's not possible for us to go first. We need to wait for something else. How functional? How much do we think it will be used? The need refers to, in a sense, the character of the road. So on a busy high-speed road, not having shared lane markings, for example, would not work, or not having any facilities would not be a good alternative. And then the last thing is the ease or complexity. So we look for the things that we can do with the least complexity or that are easiest for us, and kind of save the other ones for a little bit further down the road. And then things are divided into 4 layers or levels that we've seen before for priorities or phases. There can be a concept of transitions, and this relates to having interim facilities, or getting as much of the system complete as possible in the shortest amount of time. So we can do things in the interim, and then kind of as we're able to, or as the need arises, transition to a higher level facility. These are the typical ones. We can go from where we have shoulders to dedicated bike lanes. Our conventional bike lanes can become buffered. We can go from bike routes to bike boulevards, which is a type of shared facility. From buffered bike lanes to protected bike lanes. For intersections, from 2-stage left turn boxes to protected intersections. The first one just being a matter of striping or paint on the roadway, and the second one being more significant construction. And then I think I mentioned this a little bit before, but how do we go from where we have a foots trail to separated bike lanes at some point in the future, and how do we make that transition? I did want to mention that implementation is going to be subject to resource limitations. I listed a couple here: funding, staff availability to work on some of these things, and then finally the ability of the city to deliver projects. And I think here, in some cases, patience is called for, but I think in other cases we can look to see if there are ways we can do things, that we can do the simple things fairly simply, and kind of I think it relates to getting more bang for your buck and getting the things done quickly that we can do quickly.
Martin, Daniel has a question.
I'm warming up here. First thing, I did remember that the city already has those Bobcat snow removal things. I saw them in Heritage Square, and they clear all of Heritage Square in like 15 minutes. And the other thing that I was thinking is for the signage, which we've talked about as just a critical component, and I agree with you on that. Is that something that you envision being done in-house, or us farming that out somehow? How do you see that being implemented?
Are you talking about the
the design? Yeah, the designing of the signage and the the making of the signs and getting the signs out there.
Yeah. Honestly, I hadn't quite got to that. I think like how it works, I think we could do a lot of that ourselves with this committee and the bike community, and figure out how we want it to work. I think the design itself we could farm out to there are companies that specialize in signing and design. And I think between those two things, and then I think there's a lot of guidance already. Like if you look at NACDOT's website, they have quite a bit of information on how signing systems ought to work. So I think between the three of them, I'm confident that we can come up with something that works pretty well. One of our challenges is we need to incorporate in the foot signing as well, so that the bikeway and the foots become kind of two seamless systems. But again, I think once we sit down, we can figure that out. I will say that when you're in a place and the signing seems very intuitive and kind of effortless, a lot of thought has gone into that. There's a lot of work that goes into making signing systems and wayfinding that really works well. So I don't know when we'll get to that. It won't be too long before we have to kind of dive into how that might work, because I think that given that this is an important element or component of our network, that we have to kind of get to it fairly quickly.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. This seems like a front end. I mean, at the same time, you don't want to trot out a map that's going to change and then have to do a new map every 6 months or a year. But at the same time, it does seem like something we need to. I mean, do we need to have kind of a rough sketch to present, to pass along, to say this is what we're looking at doing? Sometimes it seems like we need to kind of do that sooner than later, to pass that along to the city council, that this is what we need to start doing to make this whole thing connect, and we need to start doing it sooner than later.
Yeah, do you think it would be beneficial to kind of start laying out some concepts to like go beyond the information that we have so far and kind of go to the next level to give people a better idea of what it might look like or how it might work, or start to figure that out?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the glue that holds everything in place, and the way that bicyclists are going to be navigating along this through this fairway. And yeah, I think that at some point, before we get too much further, it seems like we need to have something there to present to the city council and get started on it.
Okay. How about that?
Martin, I have a quick question when you're ready.
Yeah, go ahead.
So development of any of these projects, are they pending approval of the plan, the master plan? Or can things get started before it is voted on and confirmed?
We are getting started on these things before it's voted on and confirmed. So, I mean, really, there's a couple different components. One is the plan document itself, and then one is the city's capital planning process. And we're already into the city's capital planning process, so we're talking about a few of these things already. We're already talking about implementation of part of it as part of other projects like Lone Tree Overpass and the roundabout at University, and so on. So we're really doing them at the same time. Like we're not waiting for the plan to be done to start in on it.
Thanks. And there was just, Kim made a note that the county already has a lot of signage programs set up. And Lauren gave us a link to the NACDO website for that. So thanks to both of you guys for that.
So I appreciate Daniel's comments, and so maybe we'll see if there's an opportunity in the next couple of months to kind of dive into that in a little bit more detail and think about how that might work. Okay, can you still see my screen? Is it still? Okay. So let's see, if we think about the 4 priority levels, first, second, third, and fourth, and think about first is really kind of the short term. And when I think of short term, I think it's what we want to accomplish in the next 5 years, let's say. That's my idea of short term. Second is sort of very close on the heels of that, but it's the kind of the next layer of everything that we want to do. So really, first and second are kind of the things that we need to get done to really build out everything that we want. And then third and fourth just kind of continue enhancing or building on that or expanding it or whatever. But the first and the second are really are kind of the crucial ones. So I've pulled some information on what we have so far in the bikeways plan. So here's what we have existing. I've only got it divided into those 3 categories. So what we have existing is a mile. These are miles too. There are no units here. A mile of shared facilities, which is almost exclusively the shared lane markings we have downtown and on the south side, makes up that mile. 71 miles of dedicated facilities, and this is all of our existing bike lanes. And then 16 miles of protected facilities, and these are existing foot trails that are used heavily for commuting. So Route 66, the one along Fort Valley Road, really, if we've already identified which ones they are, not some of the ones that are gravel or more remote, although those are important for commuting as well, but really not part of what we have identified for our bikeway system. So the total existing is 88 miles. And it looks like that. We'll go back to that in a minute. So for the first, and again, if you want to think in terms of timeframes, this might be like within the first 5 years. The mileage for shared facilities goes up to 32, mainly because we designate a whole system of bike routes in residential areas to kind of help people with wayfinding. Dedicated goes up to 77 and protected goes up to 20. So just by way of comparison, 171 and 16 to 32, 77, and 20. So from 88 miles to 130 miles. Now, I will say this.
Martin, Kim was asking if NAU is included in the shared category.
Yes, where they have shared lane markings, they are included. Was that a hand, Lauren?
I typed in a queue, but I think it's overwhelmed by my link. I was wondering if the dedicated mile length, does that include the shoulders, or is it just bike lane?
That does include shoulders, yeah, as well. It does bring up a good point that when this just, because it's categorized like this, and we see like dedicated increasing from 71 to 77, it doesn't account for changes within the dedicated category. So if we go, for example, from a conventional bike lane to a buffered bike lane, they both show up as dedicated. And then the second round of priorities, we go to 33 miles of shared, 81 miles of dedicated, and 27 miles of protected for a total system of 141. And we can kind of go through this in map form. So here's what's existing. We have a good place to start, but we can see there's a lot of gaps. The first one, I should explain the colors are purple for protected, blue for dedicated, and orange for shared. And then if it's light gray, which you really can't see, but that means there's nothing in place yet or as part of this phase. So you can see the primary thing that we do is add a lot of bike routes. Now, these aren't necessarily facilities. It's just, people, bicyclists sharing the road with drivers on low volume, low speed, residential neighborhood streets. However, it helps us fill out the system. That if you're whatever neighborhood you live in, it may help you get from where you live out to another street that has bike lanes or to a foot trail or something like that. So it really kind of helps make the system more robust and kind of expands it into every neighborhood. And then second, it's a little bit subtle, but you can see that we start to add more facilities. For just this first phase, represented by this map, here are some preliminary numbers. I mentioned we're adding a lot of bike routes, so that's 26.3 miles. Potentially 9.4 miles of new bike lanes, 9.2 miles of buffered bike lanes. Protected bike facilities are 2.2 new miles, which again, it does not sound like a whole lot. And if we did it on a percentage basis, it would not seem like a ton, but if we do them in the right place and kind of do this as part of an overall system, where we do those could really have an impact. At intersections and crossings, there are 82 different locations that would be affected, and potentially up to 8 protected intersections. Now, the one piece of information that we're still missing is the cost of all this, which we're working on developing some high-level cost estimates to see, kind of compare what we have available and what these things cost. And that may require a further round of prioritization to make sure that we can afford, like, for example, in the next 5 years, the most important projects. So that ends the information I have to present, but I'll throw it back to the group for questions and discussion.
I got a quick question. You were mentioning first priority. What was the time limit again? 1 to 9 years, did you say, or shorter than that?
Yeah, it's gonna depend, but I would think of the first priority ones as being, that would be our target for the first 5 years. And again, the huge question is going to be funding availability, if we're able to do that what we're able to do in 5 years or not.
All right.
So are those priorities the same as on your map? You have the first, second, third, and fourth categories, and then they each had their own time categories, which I can't remember what they are.
Yeah, and I think the way things are, work is you could think of I mean, we know the first priority ones are going to. We're shooting for the first 5 years, and then the second priority ones are sometime after that. And then I think the third and the fourth ones starts to get far enough out into the future that it's more difficult to predict. So we'll see what we can do in 5 years, and then I think, in 5 years' time, we'll reassess where we are and where we want to be, and kind of reset this system and this process.
Okay, Lauren has a question, then Estella, then Daniel.
I think my question is going into the post 5 years, so somebody else should take the time. Thanks.
Estella?
Thank you. So question a bit about process. So if this plan does, or when it gets adopted, how does that fit into the actual implementation? Like, do you still have to go through modeling on a roadway, or do crosswalks still have to go through the warrants process? Or, I mean, I know not everything's guaranteed, but, can we implement this, or does it have to go then through another process and then it could get vetted out?
Yeah, I think we're doing the best we can with the information we have, but it remains at kind of a conceptual level. So we've done our best to make sure that these things are practical and can be implemented. but there's definitely the next step in the process is getting into more details. And as projects, as ideas or plans become projects, they go through a process where we develop concept level plans, like in engineering terms, they're known as 15% plans or 30% plans. And it's at that point where we start to identify if there are issues to their implementation that we have not identified so far, that, just with better information, we see that there are some potential issues. I think part of, and then you mentioned the other thing is like warrants for crosswalks. And yes, that will be part of that process. So all these things have to be, when that happens, all these things will be given more detail and kind of ground truth. I think part of our strategy is that we have a handful of projects that are kind of in this category, and if one just kind of comes to a dead stop, that we can move to the next one and kind of keep things going. It does make a little bit of a difference overall, because at some point we need to have a functional network and a functional system. So if we move past one project, we want to be careful not to leave a gap.
Daniel, did you want to jump in with your question?
Can I see that sign again, Martin, that you have? It was a quick flash, but I think
this is just an old sign that happens to be in my office.
Yeah, that's great. One thing that we've talked about a lot is just visibility, doing high visibility projects, making bicycles more visible in Flagstaff. And I think that's just a buzzword right now because of what's going on. I feel like it's a good time to really try to make bicycles super visible in town, and that's one way to do it, is to start putting those signs up everywhere. I think that should be yeah. I mean, for one thing, like last summer when you were driving into Flagstaff and you saw a big sign that said "Make room for bicycles," I was so proud of the city for doing that, and I think that that's what we need to aim for, is that we're just a super visible group in town from here on out. And I think the signage is the way to start that.
That's good. Lauren, what does NVM mean?
Never mind. It was for the
okay.
other. You already called on me.
Well, so you've opted to let Julie go first. Well, we haven't thought much about what we were going to talk about, or if Mark is available for that meeting. Martin, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the things that we've talked about, what sorts of things do you think are important to highlight? Bearing in mind that it's a fairly short time slot, but what do you want to highlight of what we're working on?
Is that to Julie or to me?
To the group.
I think exactly what you're talking about, those additional miles, those 3 categories of additional miles, and the signage.
I have a question. I mean, do we feel like the council needs to be kind of educated on any topics in the ATMP, or like any aspects that we need to highlight? Or I'm not sure on the background if you've had working groups or not.
I agree with Estella. Maybe verbiage. Does the transportation know, what we mean by shared, protected, buffered, separated, or do those things need to be explained just a smidge? I don't know.
That's probably a good place to start.
And
certainly
something.
Given.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just like something to the effect of like, and maybe they're aware, but like Flagstaff can do better. Like, and these are some ways that we can improve, cycling in Flagstaff.
Yeah, I might suggest we highlight the fact that that this is we're intending this as an overall comprehensive system or network, and it's not just a random collection of high-level facilities that we've put some thought into how the whole thing works together.
And I assume, Martin, when you say you're putting some thought into a whole thing that works together, you've also looked at that is factored into the prioritization.
Yeah. Yes. I think you've also, we've had a lot of good conversations over the months, and I think you've done a lot of really good work, and I think we should emphasize that to the council, that we've given this a lot of consideration and thought, and had a lot of good discussion about it.
Yeah, almost point by point, intersection by intersection. I agree. Really detailed.
I think it would be good if we could give some concrete, maybe this isn't possible, but give some concrete dates when we expect some projects to work or to start going into effect.
Okay.
Are they aware of the win of that connecting the Fort Tuthill with the bridge under the 17 to go over to Ponderosa Trails? That's like a
sheep crossing.
Something, yeah.
Yes.
I know at least one council member who lives in that area who uses it frequently.
So how many people think they can make it to that meeting on the board here? Either a raise of hands or say in the comment line. I'll have to take off from work, but I will be able to go, or I'll plan on going. Kim, Jeff. Well, looks like we have a quorum. That's excellent. Well, I don't know if we're allowed to coordinate after this meeting. Martin, would that violate any of our meeting outside of meeting rules?
Probably. What did you have in mind? We can just advertise it as a meeting if we need to.
Okay.
You want to have another meeting to kind of go through what we want to go through our presentation?
It might be good to touch base maybe the week before just to make sure we're on track with what we want to say, and maybe everybody submit what they think is important that we want to talk about. Does that sound good?
Yes.
And you said, Julie, we would have 5 minutes just to present the FBAC show.
There is 5 minutes set aside for AT&P and 10 minutes I've set aside for BAC. So 15. Another option is that you could have comments as part of the public comment period if individual committee members would like to make a comment about the content that was presented on that agenda item.
To highlight things a little better, maybe.
Right. Is that correct, Martin? I don't want to misspeak, but I think that would be an opportunity.
And any other city staff people want to weigh in on that?
I think that's a good suggestion. There'll be a public comment at the end of the presentation. And yeah, you'll all have an opportunity to talk about things. You'll get your three-minute opportunity. So no, I think that's a good one. And I think we'll get you tied into the team's appointments. So you'll be just right in there. It'll be really nice.
Except when we do that, Martin, this is probably a question for you. We can identify ourselves as members of the Bicycle Advisory Committee when we do that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there a help me group? Is there a you can say I belong to, but I'm not representing? Is that right, Julie? Yeah, you've done this before too.
Yes.
I'm a member of the Bicycle Advisory Committee, but I'm speaking on behalf of myself, I think is how you introduce yourself.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, this is good to talk through this.
That seems far less effective. That makes a lot more import on the 15 minutes, but I think 15 minutes is enough time. It worries me that Mark missed the second half of the meeting because that's kind of when we hammered out the details of what we want to say. And he's kind of our spokesperson at the meeting, correct?
He's supposed to be.
So we'll have to really just let him know what we're saying. But I think it can be said in 15 minutes pretty succinctly. I mean, there's not a whole lot to be said as far as like, here's where we're at, here's what we've been working on, and this is where we'd like to go. And this is, I mean, we're not going to be able to tell them how much it's going to cost, but just say a lot and give us all the money.
And by the way, we don't have enough yet.
So when we schedule a meeting before the 22nd, we'll have to make sure that Mark is available for that so he can be part of that conversation. How about, you want maps, graphics, photographs, all that stuff?
Definitely maps, and I think being able to lead people through your online maps might be beneficial to at least demonstrate what's available and what, show all the work we've put in so far. I don't know how many of the council is going to be internet friendly or map friendly, but I think that's a resource we definitely should use.
And Martin, you've brought some great photographs of exemplars of what we're talking about. I think we can flip through those pretty quickly if we're prepared.
Yeah, some of the schematics of intersections, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and just photographs of like, hey, here's exactly what we're talking about here, but from Italy or Amsterdam or Portland, or we've done a couple of those.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Susan.
Yes.
Julie said it does not have to be the chair that represents the BAC. So if Mark isn't available, maybe, since you're the vice chair, maybe that's you. Or, yay, Susan.
Yay. Well, if needed, I shall serve. If called upon, I shall serve. So we'll find out from Mark whether he's available. And then if we can all meet, what is a good night to meet if we want to meet a week beforehand just to go over things briefly, like within an hour or so. Are Thursday nights good? If so, the meeting What night is that meeting? The 22nd? That's a Tuesday.
Okay.
So maybe meet the Wednesday or Thursday before. Does that sound good for everybody? Wednesdays or Thursdays?
16th or 17th, that is.
Yeah, probably Thursday night.
Well, let's say
We do
Thursday.
Tuesday. That's next Tuesday. We can
Next.
include that as well. This is all next week, right?
Well, the 22nd, so there's a map when you need
The
it.
22nd is 13 days from now.
So we could meet Thursday, the 17th, say 5 o'clock.
Yes.
Oh, that didn't work for me, but
Who's that? Is that Matthew?
yeah.
Well, is there something that would work better?
The Wednesday works better for me, but
Say, how's everybody for Wednesday? That would work for me.
Well,
Wednesday,
Jeff made a good point that Mark may have another ride scheduled.
yeah. Would earlier or later work for you, Matthew?
actually that Thursday night I'll be out of town.
Oh, you don't have internet where you're going?
I actually get to show up live at someplace. I'm jumping to that opportunity.
nice. Congratulations. Friday?
Well, can I ask you to send all your comments or your constructive comments then if you can't make it to the meeting? And presumably everybody else will, write down maybe an outline or important comments that they'd like to see at that meeting, and we'll combine them then on Thursday, the 17th at 5. How's that go?
I can do it.
All right, let's call it Thursday, the 17th, and unless you want to switch it to Friday, which I don't. Okay.
Do you in preparation for the meeting, would you, I think we're meeting on this, Julie, Jeff and I on Friday morning. But we can take your comments and kind of put together a draft presentation for you, and then maybe have you, if we can get that out to you in advance, so much the better, but have you kind of talk about that and see what you want to change or add.
Which Friday morning? What date?
This Friday.
The 11th.
Well, but we're meeting internally. You need to be there, but we can put a draft together based on your comments from tonight.
If we submit our comments to you, so you would want those by the 11th Friday morning.
Yes, although you will still have another chance to look at the draft.
Right,
so
on the 17th.
It doesn't have to be exhaustive.
Okay.
You've given us a lot to go on tonight. Yes.
Okay. All right. So submit as many comments as you wish to Martin by Friday the 11th morning-ish. What time is your meeting that morning? Well, before Friday at 8. Okay. So by Thursday night, submit your comments to Martin et al. And then we can go over it again on the 17th at 5 p.m. Sounds good. Is everybody good with that? All right.
I am, but I am a little bit confused, and I don't know who to ask this question to, but it seems like this meeting, the only agenda item is pretty much the bicycle community is now making a bunch of noise and wants some stuff to happen quickly and has gotten themselves on the agenda. No?
May I respond, Susan?
Yeah.
Please.
Okay. So part of the Transportation Commission's charter is that we present to council annually, and we provide an update to City Council on activities of the Transportation Commission. So it just so happens that it falls on June 22nd, and we actually haven't done it in a while. So it's good that this is happening. And I don't know if actually PAC or BAC has presented previously either, but I know given the amount of work that you've done, I really wanted to include PAC and BAC and have a chunk of time set aside so that you could address council directly. So that was this happened well before the event at the end of May.
Got it.
Thank you. Great question.
I mean, it's kind of crazy timing. But like this particular committee has been chomping at the bit for the duration of time that I've been here. This committee has been just saying, how do we get started? How does something happen? How do we get the money allocated and get people started on doing these projects? And so I feel like this is like a good opportunity for us to really put that out there. And I'm afraid that our urgency will be mistaken as responsive, and it's not. It hasn't been responsive. Every meeting prior to this, we've been talking about how do we jumpstart, how do we get it going, how do the money's sitting there, how do we start implementing some of these ideas.
And I'd like to also definitely throw in the climate change emergency and how that meshes with our program goals. And Estella, she said, Martin, can you send a calendar invite to us?
Yes.
All right, so we'll check to see if Mark's going to be available for this or not, and let him know what the meetings we are planning beforehand. That sounds good. I think this should turn out well. If we're ready to move on, Martin, I did want to just quickly note, so the draft public engagement plan, I did take a moment to look over that, and as far as I can read, all those deadlines have passed, including the March 16th, and there's no years indicated, but I assume that March 16th, it said that the city council was supposed to approve the active master transportation plan. Is that the date? This past March was when they were supposed to approve that?
Yeah, unfortunately, that link to the document that you looked at is fairly out of date in terms of that schedule. So my apologies for that. There's some things that we need to work through internally, and I'm not sure exactly what all the schedule is, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll be able to get a schedule pinned down.
Yeah, that's definitely, we need to celebrate big time when we get that plan signed off on. Phew. Very good. Is there anything else we need to talk about? And again, thank you, Julie, for getting this set up. It's a hopeful thing to light a fire under the city council. Martin, did you want to talk about any of the city hall reopening? We kind of covered that. The master plans for the Milton and US 180 are still sitting there. And you can remind me, the Milton plan, the recommended action was not going to include a lot of no attached bike lanes, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
it wouldn't hurt to mention that to him too, that, you know, that the city took the least of all possible actions. It would seem to me on that it's going to it seems like it's going to be business as usual with the Milton corridor. Am I wrong?
Well, they did they have kind of first phase and a second phase, and the first phase being more, you know, short term, and they included kind of a standard shoulder for bikes like ADOT does as part of that first phase, and the second phase has a wider buffered bike lane on Milton. So it's not nothing, but it is. That's what ADOT is willing to provide.
And the second phase could be 15 years out, 10 years out?
I don't think it's possible to put a date on it. I mean, there's
Okay.
no funding identified for this. It just is, yeah.
Okay. Well, are we ready to wrap up the meeting then? I think Kim has indicated yes. And Rick, would you like to explain your comment, please?
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair. It's not that the city isn't pushing this. I want you all to be very clear that the city is battling with ADOT to achieve the desired bike lanes and a whole list of spot improvements to make Milton a great street. I hate to throw anybody under the bus, but this is an ADOT jurisdictional roadway and they make the final decisions. And we are not happy with the final decision and we are escalating. We are using every means possible to continue the discussion.
It sounds like a very typical, what the Capitol wants, Flagstaff gets shoved down its throat. A little bit. All right. Well, with that good news, let's wrap it up then. And I guess I could call for a motion to conclude the meeting, but we don't need that anymore. So unless anybody says otherwise, we can go ahead and wrap this up. All right. 10 minutes early. Daniel, what were you saying?
Thank you. Thank you all. I really do appreciate every one of you.
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate all the public that showed up, and all I can say is stay tuned. More stuff is coming down the road. Thank you all for coming, and go have a wonderful Thursday night ride, if that's what's in your plans.
Bye.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.